Why did everyone stop talking the moment she stepped off the bus? Kayla Monroe wasn't supposed to be here, not according to the sneers of teachers, the smoke-stained disappointment in her mother's voice, or the cashier who laughed when she said she was leaving town. No one thought she would make it past the county line, let alone a federal leadership camp in Colorado. The air bit harder here, thinner, sharper. Even the sky looked cleaner, like it didn't belong to someone like her. The camp stretched like a compound behind the wire fence. Marching recruits, barking orders, military buzz cuts, and the unmistakable scent of boot polish and nerves. She stood in line, boots duct-taped at the heel, holding a duffel that carried her entire life. 2 shirts, a cracked leather notebook, and a photo from when she was 7. Before everything turned dark, she didn't speak. Didn't flinch when the officer glanced at her with doubt and muttered, "She won't last a week." They handed her real boots, new, heavy. She tied them so tight it felt like she was sealing off every insult ever thrown at her. Worthless. Trash. Just like your father. Words said not behind her back, but to her face. But not here. Not anymore. That night, she lay on a narrow cot in a freezing bunkhouse, staring at the ceiling while the others snored. Her heart pounded like a fist inside her ribs. She wasn't scared. Not because this would be easy, but because, for the first time, she wasn't invisible. She woke to a siren that punched through the walls like lightning. 5 o'clock a.m. Gray light barely crept through the windows. "Move!" Someone bellowed. She moved. Outside, 30 others lined the gravel field. Most looked like they belonged. ROTC kids, clean shoes, clipped voices. Kayla's uniform hung loose on her small frame. She stood stiff, teeth clenched. Someone snorted. Behind her, "This ain't rehab, sweetheart." She didn't answer. She couldn't finish the morning test. Push-ups, pull-ups, running uphill through frozen mud. She collapsed halfway through the course. Legs trembling, breath ragged. The medic said she could stay. Captain Little didn't say anything, just made a note on the clipboard. Monroe. Borderline. Probable drop. She saw it, memorized it, let it burn. In the mess hall, no one sat next to her. That's when she noticed the shadow. A woman, broad shoulders, deep eyes, a scar that sliced from temple to jaw. She sat down without a word. "Why are you here?" she asked. Kayla swallowed hard. "I want to change my life. This isn't therapy." The woman replied flatly, "It's transformation through pain. Are you sure you want it?" "Yes, ma'am," Kayla said. The woman said nothing more, just stood up, but something flickered in her eyes before she walked away. Respect or curiosity? That night, when everyone else slept, Kayla tied her boots and ran. Laps around the gravel yard in the dark. Her breath fogged. Her knees ached. She tripped once, tore her palm on the ground. Kept going. No one saw. Especially then. She kept going. The next day, she failed again. Whispers circled like wolves. "She's dragging us down. Not built for this." The woman Sergeant Ramirez watched her, then handed her a weighted pack. "Wear it, train harder, or go home." She wore it, even during meals, even when her back screamed. By week 2, she knew every emergency protocol by heart. Still couldn't beat anyone in a sprint, but she didn't quit, not once, during an endurance march. A recruit Simmons twisted his ankle. The others kept going. She didn't. She hoisted him up, carried him 4 miles without a word, mud up to her knees, sweat freezing against her neck. Captain Little watched from a distance. That night, she found a folded note under her bunk. 4 words, "Now you're being seen." The whispers didn't stop, but they lost their venom. A few recruits started calling her Tank, not as a joke, as a nickname. She wasn't the best, but she was always there, first in, last out, always carrying more than her share. Ramirez started watching closer, pulled her aside, quizzed her on tactics, showed her how to see beyond the drill, how to read people. See their cracks, their breaking points. Captain Little scratched something new on the clipboard. Monroe, resilient. Keep an eye on her. And still, after lights out, Kayla would take out her notebook. Dear Mr. President, the letters began. No one was going to read them. She never planned to send them, but she wrote. She wrote about the graveyard shifts at the gas station, the leering men, the mother who called her a mistake, the rats in the ceiling. She wrote about the feeling she had when she carried Simmons down. The mountain. She wrote about hope. She wrote like it was oxygen, like it was the only thing she truly owned. She didn't know Ramirez had read one. Didn't know that the note under her bunk was Ramirez's. Didn't know that someone powerful was about to read one of those letters, and that it would turn her life upside down. But that moment was still miles ahead. For now, she just kept running in the dark. And finally, someone was beginning to follow. Why did she stop when no one else did? It was week 4. The recruits were deep in a field simulation, loud, chaotic, smoke curling like ghosts through the trees. Simulated gunfire, civilians screaming, explosions rattling their bones. It was a drill, but the panic felt real. One girl, Vega, from Chicago, froze, dropped her radio, stood still, trembling like glass. Everyone else moved on. Protocol was clear. Finish the mission, leave no one behind, but only if they're not a liability. Kayla stopped. She turned, grabbed Vega by the shoulders, and locked eyes with her. You're safe. Breathe. I got you. Vega blinked, nodded. They moved together, slow at first, then steady. Later that day, Ramirez pulled Kayla aside. Her voice was lower, steadier. You've got something. Kayla tilted her head. I'm just trying to survive. No, Ramirez said. You're leading. That's different. The words stuck in Kayla's chest like a match pressed to dry wood. She didn't reply. Didn't know how that night. After lights out, while Kayla was in the showers, Ramirez passed her bunk. The cracked notebook peeked from under. The pillow, pages loose. She meant to close it, but her eyes caught a line. They say I'm broken, but when I carry people, I feel whole. Ramirez read more than she should have. Words of bruises, starvation, silence. A girl who hadn't cried in years because she forgot what safety felt like. She closed the book gently, left it exactly where it was. But something inside her shifted, and later that night, she made a decision that would travel farther than any of them could imagine. Kayla kept grinding. Her foot had started swelling, a deep, burning throb with every step. She wrapped it each morning in silence, gritted her teeth, said nothing. Pain was nothing new, but being sent home now? That would shatter her. During a ruck march through the hills, she stumbled, caught herself on a tree root. Ramirez saw the limp. Later, the camp medic pulled her aside. Stress fracture, he said. It'll break if you don't rest. She nodded, then lied. I'm fine. Captain Little reviewed her file that night. He tapped the paper. She's right on the edge again. We push her through survival week. One more failure, she's gone. Ramirez said nothing at first, then simply said, let's see what she does in the woods. And so began the infamous 48-hour survival test. No shelter, no food, no gear. Dropped into the mountains in teams and told to find their way out together. The terrain was brutal, the cold. Worse, it rained on the first night. Kayla's team got lost by midnight. One guy panicked. Another tried to fake an injury to be disqualified. But Kayla kept them moving. Her foot screamed. Her muscles shook. But she built shelter from fallen branches, started a fire with flint and steel, shared the only energy bar she'd hidden in her jacket. When they fought, she calmed them. When they froze, she made decisions. By the second dawn, her foot had ballooned inside her boot. She used a branch as a crutch. Refused help. We're finishing this, she said, and they did. They were the only team to complete the simulation without a single dropout. When they stumbled into camp wet, muddy, exhausted, The instructors didn't say a word. They just watched Kayla limp toward the med tent, refusing a stretcher. She's running on pure grit, one officer whispered that night. Captain Little crossed out the red mark next to her name and wrote a single line. Retain. Elite resilience. Inside the infirmary, Ramirez visited her. You're not supposed to keep going when it hurts like that. Kayla looked away. I'm used to pain. This pain has purpose. Ramirez exhaled, sat down beside her. You're not just surviving anymore, she said. You're changing the story. Kayla's voice cracked. Then, why does it still feel like I don't belong? Ramirez leaned forward, her voice quieter now. Because the world spent your whole life convincing you that you didn't. But that story? That one's over. 2 days later, Kayla was back in uniform, cane in one hand, bandaged foot inside. Her boot? She stood at roll call, not because she had to, but because she refused to be forgotten again. And then came the call. It started like any morning. Gray wind, shouted drills, mud squelching under boots. Monroe. Someone called over the loudspeaker. A pause. Report to command office. Immediately, whispers flew like smoke. She's getting cut. Kayla didn't answer, just limped forward. Heartbeat a thunderclap in her chest. She had survived everything. The drills, the nights, the doubts, but somehow this felt like the scariest moment of all. Inside the command office, Ramirez stood still, arms crossed, next to her. A man in a dark suit, no patches, no nameplate. He didn't belong. Sit, Ramirez said gently. Kayla sat. The man stepped forward. Miss Monroe, I'm Agent Miles, Secret Service. Kayla blinked. What? You wrote a letter, he said. Several, actually, addressed to the President of the United States. Her mouth dried up. I never sent them. You didn't have to, Ramirez said. I sent one. Agent Miles picked up a black phone, pressed a button, the line clicked, and then a voice. Calm, warm, familiar. Hello, Kayla. This is President James Keller. Do you have a moment to talk? Time stopped. She looked at Ramirez, eyes wide. Ramirez gave a single nod. Kayla picked up the receiver with trembling hands. Yes, sir, she whispered. Good, said the president, because I read your letter 3 times, and I want you to know something very important. His voice was steady, measured, but it struck her like a floodlight. You are never worthless. What do you say when the most powerful man in the world tells you that you matter? Kayla couldn't breathe. The line was silent for a moment, except for the faint hum of the secure phone. Her hand shook as she gripped the receiver. She stared. The floor, afraid that if she looked at Ramirez or Agent Miles, she'd fall apart. Kayla, the president continued, his voice gentle. I know what it means to come from nothing. I know what it's like to walk into a room and feel like you don't belong there. But you didn't just survive. You carried people. You endured. You led. Tears blurred her vision. She didn't even try to stop them. That's not just strength, he said. That's leadership. That's the kind of story this country needs to hear. Her voice barely made it out. I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything, he replied. You've already proven who you are. We just finally noticed. The line clicked. Silence. Kayla lowered the phone slowly, her hand still trembling. Agent Miles nodded with a rare smile. Congratulations, Miss Monroe. You just made history. She blinked at him. Her mouth opened, but no words came. Ramirez touched her shoulder gently. You're not invisible anymore. The news spread like wildfire. Within hours, everyone at the camp knew, not just that she'd received a call, but who it was from, what it meant. By dinner, they were calling her Commander Monroe. Some as a joke, others not, but she didn't care, because this time, the whispers didn't hurt. They felt like wind, like movement, at formation. Ramirez stood tall in front of the recruits. Today, she announced, one of your own received A direct call from the President of the United States. Her story will be shared across this country. Her courage will shape national policy. Then she paused. That recruit is Kayla Monroe. No cheers at first, just silence. Then like a fuse lit, the field erupted. Applause, gasps. Even the ones who once doubted her now reached out to shake her hand. She stood still in the noise, numb and light all at once. The next morning, the camp director announced an all-recruit assembly. It was rare. Usually reserved for disciplinary dismissals or crisis updates. Kayla stood at the back, her cane tucked under her arm, her foot still swollen, still healing. She didn't expect to be called forward until Ramirez appeared beside her again. "You'll want to come to the front," she said quietly. Kayla blinked. "Why?" Ramirez smiled, a real one, soft at the edges. "Trust me." As Kayla stepped forward, the entire group shifted, parting to let her pass. Some reached out to pat her shoulder. Others saluted at the front. A massive screen blinked to life. The presidential seal. A hush fell. Then came the live feed. The president himself. "Good morning," he said. "Today I speak not just as commander-in-chief, but as someone who believes in second chances, in unseen potential." He looked directly into the camera. "Kayla Monroe, are you with us?" She raised a hand, stunned. "Yes, sir. I read your letter," he said, "and I want everyone here to hear what I saw in it." He read her words aloud. "I don't want medals or speeches. I just want to believe that where I came from doesn't have to be where I end up." The crowd was silent. Then the president continued. "You've shown more grit, more compassion, and more leadership than many twice your age. And for that, I am proud to welcome you as the newest member of the National Youth Leadership Council." Reporting directly to my administration. Applause thundered. Kayla didn't move. She couldn't. She just stood there, eyes wide, heart full, breath caught. The girl who once swept up beer cans behind a gas station now had a seat at the table of power. The screen faded. Captain Little stepped forward. He'd barely spoken to her in weeks, not directly, not with respect. Now, he stood tall. "You've redefined what this program stands for," he said. "Not just strength, but character." She nodded. Couldn't find words. Later that night, the bunkhouse was different. Dozens of recruits came to her cot, not with jokes or rolled eyes, but with handshakes, hugs, quiet thank yous. "You earned this. You inspire me. I used to think I was better than you. I was wrong." Vega waited for her near the door. The same girl who'd once frozen in the field now handed Kayla her old notebook. "You left this," Vega said. "I thought you'd want it back." Kayla took it, flipped through the pages. They were still there. The pain, the doubt, the dreams. She'd only ever whispered on paper, but now they didn't feel like a confession. They felt like proof. At midnight, she stood outside beneath the stars. She wasn't afraid of the dark anymore. She'd lived in it her whole life. Now she was the light. Why did the air feel different when she stepped off the bus? It wasn't cleaner. It wasn't quieter. But something had changed. Kayla Monroe stood at the edge of the same crumbling Mississippi sidewalk she had once walked barefoot as a girl. The gas station was still there. Rusted pumps, burned-out lights, faded open sign blinking like it was tired of trying. But this time, people were watching. Cameras clicked. A local news van parked across the street. A reporter stumbled out, mic in hand, breathless. "Kayla Monroe?" he asked. "Do you have time for a few questions?" She blinked. "Me?" The story had already traveled ahead of her. Clips of the president's speech aired nationwide. Her words quoted in schools, on Senate floors, online. They were calling her the girl who refused to break. But none of it felt real until that moment. Until her old boss wrinkled shirt, hands in his pockets, muttered from the corner, "Didn't think you'd actually make it." She looked at him, not with anger. "Neither did I." A group of teens stood nearby. One held out a crumpled notebook. "I started writing," he said softly. "Like you." Her throat tightened, but it wasn't until she stood outside her mother's door that she truly felt it. Same chip paint, same broken window. Nothing had changed, except her. She knocked. The door creaked open. Her mother stood there, older, thinner, sober, eyes hollow but alert. "I saw you on TV," she said. Kayla said nothing at first. She wanted to feel angry, wanted to demand apologies, but what came was calm. "I'm not here to fight," she said quietly. "I just wanted you to know I made it." Her mother nodded, eyes glistening. "I was wrong about everything." Kayla didn't answer. She stepped forward and hugged her, not to erase the past, but to move beyond it. In the following weeks, Kayla didn't rest. She met with local leaders, sat in front of city council members who had never once seen her as more than a dropout statistic. She spoke with state officials, worked the phones, and 2 months later, she opened the doors to something her town had never seen. The Monroe Youth Center, a safe space for teens who were told they were nothing, who had bruises too deep to show, who carried silence heavier than backpacks. Inside, donated books, a computer lab, therapy access. On the wall behind glass were framed pages from her notebook. At the top, a title, "To the Kids No One Believed." In every day, kids trickled in, some with anger behind their eyes, some with sadness so loud it echoed. Kayla welcomed them all. "You belong here," she said. "You're not broken. You're just beginning." She spoke at schools, town halls, even juvenile centers. She never rehearsed, never memorized. She just told the truth. "You'll be told you're worthless," she said once to a packed gym. "Don't listen. They don't see what you're made of. But you will one day, you will." And they listened, not because she shouted, but because she didn't. Because her strength came with silence, steadiness, survival. One evening, as she locked up the youth center, she spotted a girl 13 maybe, thin arms, nervous eyes, a notebook clutched in her hands. Kayla knelt beside her. "Writing letters?" she asked. The girl nodded. "To someone who'll never read them." Kayla smiled softly. "Maybe," she said. "Or maybe they'll end up changing the whole world." That night, she walked home under the same sky she used to beg for escape. But she wasn't wishing anymore. She was answering someone else's. Why did her boots feel heavier now? Not from pain, but from purpose. 1 year later, Kayla Monroe stood beneath the chandeliers of the White House East Room. Lights sparkled like glass stars above her head. The crowd was quiet, polished, powerful senators, generals, CEOs, activists, photographers, people whose names filled newspapers and lined government halls. And her, the girl who once wrapped her boots in cardboard. She wore a simple navy dress, and those same black combat boots from Colorado Springs, polished, but not replaced. They were part of her story. And she wasn't done telling it. When they called her name, she stepped up to the podium. Her heartbeat didn't race. Her hands didn't tremble. Not anymore. She didn't read from a script. She didn't need to. "I used to believe I was invisible," she began. "Not because no one looked at me, but because when they did, all they saw was a burden, a mistake, a girl from nowhere." The room stilled. "But I wasn't invisible. I was just unseen." Her voice rang low, steady, rich with something more than confidence, conviction. She glanced across the crowd and locked eyes with Ramirez, seated near the front in full uniform. Her face was softer now, proud. The president sat beside her, hands folded, nodding gently. Kayla continued. "I used to write letters in the dark," she said, "to someone I thought would never read them. But those words weren't just letters. They were survival. They were belief written by someone who had no proof she was allowed to believe in anything at all." A hush fell over the room. Someone sniffled in the second row. She paused, letting the weight of her truth settle. "I stand here today, not because I was rescued," she said, "but because I refused to break." She took a breath. And now I want to say something to anyone listening. To anyone who has ever been told they're worthless. Her voice lowered, gentle but ironclad. You are not broken. You are becoming. Thunderous applause. The kind that echoed through marble and memory. Flashes popped. People stood, some clapped with their hands. Others clapped with their hearts. But Kayla didn't smile for the cameras. Later that night, long after the handshakes faded and the rooms were emptied of speeches and small talk, she slipped out. She walked alone through the summer warmth of D.C., her boots soft against the pavement. She passed monuments, fountains, rows of flags moving in the breeze like whispers. And then she stopped at the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. The marble glowed silver in the moonlight. She climbed slowly, each step echoing like a heartbeat. At the top, beneath Lincoln's towering presence, she knelt. From her jacket pocket, she pulled a folded page, worn, soft, familiar. It was her last letter, not to the president, not to herself, but to the next girl. She laid it at the statue's base, pressed it flat with her palm, and read the words silently. To the next girl who thinks she's nobody, I know what you feel. I know what it's like to scream inside and hear nothing come back. But hear this. You are not worthless. You are not weak. You are not the names they call you. You are iron. You are fire. You are going to rise. I was you once, but I found my way. And so will you. Kayla Monroe. She stood up, looked out over the city. No audience, no camera, no applause. Just the wind, just the stars, just the girl who had once been broken, now whole. As she turned and made her way back down the steps, a security guard near the base looked up from his post. He recognized her. You're that girl, right? He asked. The one the president called? Kayla paused, then shook her head gently. No, she said with a quiet smile. I'm the girl who answered. And she walked on, boots tapping, softly, like a heartbeat that finally found its rhythm. Why were kids waiting outside before the doors even opened? It had only been 3 days since Kayla's return from Washington, but word had spread faster than she could have imagined. News clips, hashtags, memes, quotes. The speech at the White House had become a spark, and now the fire had reached her hometown. She arrived early that morning at the Monroe Youth Center, unlocking the front door while the sky was still pink with sunrise. A line of kids already waited outside, backpacks slung over one shoulder, notebooks tucked under arms. Some looking like they hadn't slept, others looking like they hadn't eaten. Kayla held the door open. Come in, she said. This place was built for you. The building wasn't big. A converted rec center with paint still drying on the back wall, but inside it held something rare. Safety, warmth, respect. A boy with a bruised cheek asked if he could use the computer lab. A girl who hadn't spoken in a week asked if Kayla would read her poem. A counselor stopped Kayla in the hall. They trust you, she whispered. Even the ones who trust no one. Kayla smiled, tired but full. I was them once, she said. I know how heavy silence can get. She spent the next few weeks working nonstop. There were meetings with school boards, video calls with the Department of Education, phone interviews with national outlets. But the most important moments came between those headlines. Like the time she found a boy crying in the stairwell. He had just failed a math test, convinced it proved everything the world said about him, that he'd never make it. Kayla sat beside him on the stairs, said nothing for a long time, just sat. Then finally, she said, You know what I did the first time I failed a test? He looked at her, red-eyed. What? I wrote a letter, told someone I didn't even know that I felt like nothing, like a ghost. He stared. Did they write back? He asked. She smiled. Eventually, another day, she visited a local high school. A teacher pulled her aside afterward, voice hushed. That girl you talked to? The one with the hood up? She hasn't spoken to anyone all semester. Kayla nodded. She didn't need to know the rest, because she knew that silence, knew it intimately. The silence that wasn't quiet, but full of war drums, self-doubt, and invisible bruises. She spent that night going through stacks of handwritten letters the center had received. Dozens of kids, some from her town, others from across the country, had written in. Some letters asked questions. Some were just blank pages with one sentence scrawled across the top. Am I worth anything? She read every one and replied, not all at once, not with polished language, but with the same voice she once scribbled in her notebook. You're not broken. You're becoming. The next month, something strange happened. Local news turned national. Again, not because of another speech, but because of something simpler. The center's reading room was full of kids, not just reading, but writing letters to no one, letters to someone, letters to anyone who might understand. The staff started collecting them, pinning them to the back wall. A tapestry of ink and hope and pain. Some of the pages said things like, they laugh when I talk. I don't know how to breathe when I wake up. My dad calls me stupid every day. But others said, I helped my little brother today. I didn't give up, even though I wanted to. Kayla Monroe says I'm becoming. I want to believe her. Kayla spent nights reading until her eyes blurred, until her hands ached. But she read them all, because they weren't just stories. They were mirrors, and she would not let any of them go unnoticed. Why was the mayor sitting in the back row of a middle school gymnasium? He didn't announce himself, didn't ask for a reserved seat. He just sat there, quietly, like everyone else watching the girl who once mopped gas station floors now standing. On a folding stage in worn-out boots and a soft blue blouse, Kayla Monroe gripped the mic gently. The room was full, students, teachers, parents, even a few skeptics standing by the exit with crossed arms. She didn't use a speech, just her voice. I was 16 the first time I dropped out. She said, not because I didn't want to learn, but because it felt like the world had already decided who I was. She scanned the room. She didn't raise her voice to hold their attention. I got tired of fighting to be seen. She continued, so I stopped asking. Silence. I worked nights at a gas station, lived above a pawn shop, ate whatever was discounted, and every night I wrote letters. Not to anyone real, just to someone I hoped might care. She paused. You know what I wrote in those letters? The truth, the kind no one wants to hear. That I felt like a mistake. Like maybe my mom was right to say I shouldn't have been born. That maybe I didn't have a future. A few students shifted. One lowered their hoodie. Another blinked fast, holding back tears. But then, someone answered. She took a breath, and everything changed. She told them about the training, the cold, the drills, the pain, the survival week. But most of all, she told them about the moment she stopped surviving and started leading. Afterward, there was a line, kids waiting to hug her, shake her hand. Some too scared to speak, just holding out folded pages of paper. One girl, no older than 12, whispered, they call me trash at school. But when you talk, I feel strong. Kayla knelt. You are strong, she said. You just haven't had anyone say it loud enough yet. That night, the mayor stopped her in the hallway. I remember when your mother came into my office, he said quietly, begging for help. You were 9. I didn't take her seriously. Kayla didn't speak. He continued, I'm sorry for all of it. She nodded. I didn't need you then, she said. But the next girl might, so listen next time. He looked down, humbled. Yes, ma'am. The following week, Kayla was invited to speak at a national youth summit in Chicago as she stepped on stage. The screens behind her flickered to life with headlines. From gas station to the White House, the letter that changed everything. Leadership in combat boots. She smiled, just slightly. Because the real headline was quieter than all. Of those, the real story wasn't about her success. It was about survival turned to service. During the Q&A, someone asked, Do you ever feel like you're still that girl? The one with nothing? Kayla looked out over the sea of young faces. Thought about it. Every day, she said. But now I know something I didn't know then. She leaned forward, voice low but powerful. I wasn't nothing. I was just becoming. Why did she come back to the mountain? 1 year, 2 months, and 17 days after leaving Colorado Springs, Kayla Monroe stood once more at the edge of the gravel parade ground where it all began. Same wind, same sky, but everything else was different. She wasn't a recruit anymore. She wasn't here to prove anything. She was here because Ramirez had called. There's a new class. Ramirez had said over the phone. One of them reminds me of you. Kayla had laughed. That bad? No, Ramirez replied. That's strong. Just doesn't know it yet. Now Kayla stood at the front of the formation, not as a student, but as a guest instructor. Her badge said, Advisor. Her voice didn't need to shout. The recruits were lined up, shivering, staring, one girl near the end, tiny, unsure, trying to blend in, caught Kayla's eye, not because of what she said, but because of how she stood, tense, silent, like she was already planning her exit. Kayla knew that posture, knew it too well. She stepped forward. You don't know me, she said to the group. But a few years ago, I stood where you're standing. She paused. I'd failed out of school, slept above a pawn shop, got laughed out of every room I walked into. Her voice was calm, and now I sit on federal councils, help write education policy, run a center for youth back home, not because I got lucky. She looked at the girl with the tight shoulders, but because someone gave me a shot, and I didn't waste it. Ramirez stood nearby, arms crossed, smiling quietly. Later, after the drills, Kayla found the recruit sitting alone, hands balled into fists. You hate it here? Kayla asked gently. The girl didn't answer at first, then nodded. They said I don't belong. Kayla sat beside her. They said that to me too, until I stopped listening. The girl hesitated, then whispered, How did you do it? Kayla looked out toward the mountains, the snow-dusted ridges, the long, brutal trail of becoming. I started writing letters, she said. The girl furrowed her brow. To who? Kayla smiled. To someone who might care. Eventually, someone did. The recruit blinked, then pulled a folded paper from her back pocket. I write, she said softly, but I don't show anyone. Kayla reached out. That's your fire. Don't let anyone put it out. They sat there for a long time. No words between them, just understanding. Before Kayla left camp that night, Ramirez handed her something. An envelope. What's this? Kayla asked. Ramirez shrugged. A letter. Found it in the archives. It's yours, from your file. Kayla opened it in her hotel room. Inside was a scan of her original notebook page, the one Ramirez had submitted to the director, the one that traveled all the way to the president's desk. The words were faded now, but they still hit like thunder. I don't want to be a hero. I just want someone to tell me I matter, even once. Kayla ran her fingers over the ink, closed her eyes, breathed. She mattered. And now she was the voice that told others they did too. 3 months later, Kayla Monroe stood once again in Washington, not in the East Room this time, but on the Capitol steps. A new bill was being signed, one that would fund youth centers like hers in every major city. The president, grayer now, approached her after the cameras turned off. Still writing? He asked. Always, she said. You ever think of running for office? She laughed. I'm not political, he smiled. Neither was I until someone made me feel seen. He shook her hand. Let me know when you're ready. That night, she walked past the Lincoln Memorial again. She didn't climb the steps this time. She didn't need to, because she knew the letter was still there. Waiting not for her, but for the next girl. Sometimes, dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts, and sometimes, the loudest stories begin in silence, in a whisper scribbled in a forgotten notebook, in a girl no one believed in, who became a voice the world could no longer ignore. Kayla Monroe was never just a soldier. She was the reminder. Strength isn't always loud, and some leaders don't rise. They endure until the world has no choice but to follow.